Hi, I'm Joe Walensky, and I'm the principal of Walensky and Associates. And we have an upcoming event, which is Writers UA East in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is being held in cooperation with the Department of English at NC State. And I'm pleased to be able to talk today with one of the people from that institution, Huiling Ding. Hello, hi, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Thank you, Jill. How are you?
Yeah, everything's going pretty good. I'm talking from my home office in Seattle. Where are you speaking to us from today?
I'm speaking from RTP, North Carolina.
Well, we really appreciate NC State and your department offering to share your very nice venue and resources for this program. A good place to start as being one of the speakers on the program. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about your background and your experience in this area and what you're currently doing at NC State?
Sure. So I got my PhD in rhetoric composition from Purdue, and most of my research focuses on race communication, health communication, medical rhetoric, and epidemics. Another part deals with intercultural global communication and pedagogy related to comm in the international settings. So that's my background. And then in terms of, so I can talk briefly about my teaching as well. So I've been teaching mostly global technical communication, covering issues ranging from global UX to accessibility to writing for translation and use of global English. And another area that I focus on is theory and research methods in technical communication.
And what are you involved with in terms of the department? Tell us a little bit about your work in your department at NC State and the types of degrees that you offer.
Okay, sure, yeah. So my department is a pretty multidisciplinary one. So we have faculty focus on technical communication, relevant composition, literature, linguistics, and so on. So for us, technical communication, we have a master's program, Master of Science program in technical communication, and then an interdisciplinary program with communication studies, a doctoral program on CRDM, communication rhetoric, and digital media. So what I'm working mostly with is our MS in Technical Communication program, and I'm currently the program and the director of the graduate program, the DGP. So I'm in charge of recruiting students, mentoring students, advising them, helping them with capstone, assigning them advisors, and so on and so forth. So for our program, it's a 2-year master's program, and we have close collaboration with local industrial partners. And we have about 1/3 of students coming with full-time working experiences and mostly as tech professionals. And then we have another 2/3 as fresh out of college, undergraduate students with BAs and sometimes engineering degrees or science degrees.
Well, it's good to hear about your program, and where I'm always interested in finding out about other programs around the country that are helping to get a new generation of technical communicators going. And certainly you're in an area that has always had a lot of technology in the research triangle, and that continues to grow. Are there any things that you are doing in your program that is adjusting to some of the latest technologies that we find emerging?
Oh, that's a really good question. I would say we've been incorporating new components such as single sourcing and content strategy and accessibility and mobile communication, designing for mobile devices in our curriculum. So that's one venue. And then another really important opportunity for students is to work with clients, real world clients, often profit or non-profit organizations, to use technologies they wanted to learn in the capstone projects. So for instance, for our capstone projects in the last 2 years, we had students working on virtual reality or augmented reality, projects designing instructional videos for instance, like 3D printers and those kind of, new technologies. But I think mostly it's more like, working on a project base and getting a lot of technical support from the um, program provider, software provider, and then getting help from library and learning from discussion forums. So it's more like this learning journey for a lot of students and faculty as well.
Well, it's good to hear that there's such a good practical supplement to the studies that the students are involved in. As one of the speakers at the conference, we should talk a little bit about the topic that you're going to present. The title is Creating Global Content Strategy for Two Chinese Universities. So tell us a little bit about this case study and what we can expect to learn from it.
Sure. So this project actually came from my contact with technical communication practitioners and faculty back in China, because technical communication is an emerging field in China, and a lot of the faculty are actually located in traditional department of English. So when a lot of Chinese universities were, motivated or pushed to create their English websites, and they started to look for internal and external help, and oftentimes they may contract the project to web design companies, which would be doing more like translation of other web content. And then there were also universities that actually went to their Department of English and say something like, you know English and you're in tech comm, design. Can you help us to design your websites? So I was contacted by quite a few of my colleagues asking me, how do we do this as faculty of tech comm and English? So I've been working with them, and usually the starting point is to do some content audit of existing Chinese or English websites and do competitive analysis and see what's going on, and then do user testing and say what are the potential prospective international students looking for when they use your website. So all these were new to them, and they were like, okay, so it's a lot more than translation. So basically, this project was for me to work with one of my students and take a look at the existing website. So we did some random sampling of some of the top universities and then some of the second-tier universities in China that had English presence, and then to look at the websites and say what's going on there, and then do user research with prospective and current international students in China, and then look at their information needs. And so the comparison was really interesting, and we found out a lot of gap in the existing content, including the translated version and the trans-created version of the websites. So hopefully we will, talk about the gap, and then we will present our recommendations in terms of best practices in creating global websites for higher education institutions, and then some of their guidelines or templates or workflows. So it's going to be kind of interesting to our end users as well. I presented some of my findings to the faculty back there, and they were like, oh, so you are asking us to reinvent the wheel instead of using existing wheel.
From your experience with the institutions in China and just your understanding of how things are in that country, what do you see as the similarities or differences in how students are prepared for technical communication in China versus in the United States, and how things are different or similar in the way that technical communication is done in the workplace?
So I'll start with the first question. So how students are prepared, how they are trained. I think it's a very different approach because if you look at the job ads for technical communicators in China, I would say maybe 80% of those ads will look for students with engineering background, engineering students who can write in English. So that's something that's, I think, already taking place in Europe, because Europe also reported some kind of field convergence between technical translation and technical communication. And we are seeing the beginning of this trend in China as well. But even though I would say formal educational programs for technical communication took place or now have been studied mostly in Master of Translation and Interpretation programs, there are efforts to offer, technical writing courses to engineering students as well, because that's where, most students will be hired in engineering, civil engineering, mechanical engineering, electronic engineering. But there are also positions for English majors or, masters of translation for the high-tech industry. For instance, like web-based or computer, mobile device-based industries. So I think that's like the two different ways students get professionalized or educated. And then in terms of the programs, I think some of the issues that's now widely discussed is, how do we professionalize our faculty who want to move from traditional English to technical communication as a discipline. So there's collaboration between TechComm Association in China and the TechComm Europe. I'm not sure whether you are familiar with that. So that's more like a professional organization of technical communicators in Europe. And they've been studying TechComm conference in Shanghai, which has been ongoing for 4 years. So the first one was started in 2015, and it has been growing very quickly. So that's one value for technical communicators to get professionalized and to catch up with what's going on in the industry. Another thing that's really promising is a collaboration between industry practitioners and academic programs, because for the new programs, they have to establish internship programs and then give students practical opportunities to work in the industry. So that's going on as well.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today and providing us a little bit of info about your work at NC State, our host venue, which will be in October the 4th and 5th in Raleigh, and also giving us a little insight into the TechComm education in China. And so I'll see you in just a few months in Raleigh.
Yeah, great. I look forward to seeing everyone here. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Huiling.